All right, so hello everyone. My name is Lauren Antone, and I'm the Senior Marketing and Events Coordinator at MAR, as well as the producer of our free webinar series. Happy National Data Privacy Day. Our webinar today is Own Your Privacy. This webinar will cover how your information is collected, shared, and used, and how to protect your personal data, including recommendations to help ensure kids' online privacy. We will go over how to protect your client's privacy, including what actions and considerations organizations should employ when trying to protect personal data. After our live session, the webinar will be recorded and added to our website at marealtor.com. If you have any questions throughout the session, please type them in the chat box on your screen and we'll hold a Q&A afterward. Our presenter today is Wade Richmond. Wade is the founder and CEO of CISO ToGo, LLC, and holds over 35 years of experience in the IT field. Most recently, he has been responsible for establishing and managing the cybersecurity and technology risk programs at large enterprises like BJ's Wholesale Clubs, Citizens Financial Group, CVS Pharmacies, and more. In all these roles, he has been responsible for providing leadership and direction to all cybersecurity and technology risk efforts associated with IT applications, communications, and computing services. As such, Wade has functioned as the face of security and has been responsible for the development and management of corporate-wide cybersecurity programs, as well as the planning and execution of enterprise-wide IT risk management strategies. Now, over to Wade.
Can you hear me? I think I might be muted.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Lauren. Appreciate everybody being here today. We're going to get right into this. So, just so we're all clear on this, we are all being watched, right? So when we log into our fun connected tech devices, whatever those are, we're continuously generating information about each of us, ourselves, and about those that we're connected with. And that abundance of data, that's exactly what the bad guys are looking for, and they're going to be able to use it in negative ways. So when the personal information, while our personal information is certainly valuable to the organization that we work for, it's something that has increasing value as well to your customers and more likely to you as time goes on and as they collect more information. So a little bit of background here about Data Privacy Week. Data Privacy Day began in January of 2008. It's an extension of the Data Protection Day in Europe. It's observed annually on January 28th, and it commemorates the signing of what's called Convention 108. That was the first legally binding international treaty dealing with privacy and data protection. 2022 actually marks the transition from Data Privacy Day into Data Privacy Week. So happy Data Privacy Week to all of you. The three primary objectives of Data Privacy Week remain the same as Data Privacy Day. And those are, as on the screen here, spread awareness about online privacy, educate individuals on how to manage and secure their personal information, and encourage businesses to be more transparent about how they collect, store, and use that data. And those are all the topics that we're going to cover today. But what is the big deal about data privacy anyway? Why do we even care about it? Well, there's a few reasons, and I'm not going to read through all these bullets, although you'll have access to them. So there's regulatory compliance, right? So if you have ever been involved in an organization that deals with products being sold or transacting with information from Europe, you'd be familiar with, or at least have heard of, the General Data Privacy Data Protection Regulation, rather, GDPR. That was adopted in 2016 by Europe. Since then, several US states have joined that growing consumer privacy demand, and by enacting their own regulations. There's a couple of acts in California, the Privacy Act and the Privacy Rights Act. There is one in Colorado, and there's one in Virginia. Now, more states are likely to follow. There are some that exist in other states, including Massachusetts. But this expanding universe of privacy concerns means that we, all companies, need to be carefully monitoring our own regulatory compliance obligations. We don't want to end up on the wrong side of the law if we choose to, choose to ignore maybe a dramatic statement, but fail to comply with the regulations as they're put forward. Another reason is that it's simply what consumers expect. Even if you put the regulatory concerns aside, prioritizing how data privacy is handled is simply good for your business. There's an increasing awareness among consumers of how their private data is collected and used. And a lot of Americans now, the majority of Americans actually report that they have concerns about how companies are using their personal information. So given that, it's just the right thing to do. So regardless of what industry you're in or who your consumers are, it's your relationships with those consumers are built upon trust in professionalism, trust in the quality of goods and services you're providing, and that you're going to uphold expectations around core values and specifically around privacy. Data privacy is one way of paying back that trust. That's how you might want to think about it. We're all obviously living, breathing human beings. We have a right to privacy. We have an expectation that that right is going to be honored. And it's simply the right thing to do, as I said. So we're going to consider how privacy, some privacy best practices from two perspectives. First, from individuals, and secondly, for organizations. And we're going to kick this off by focusing on individuals. So the mantra for individuals in regards to data privacy is keep it private. There are some major themes here that we're going to cover. We're going to speak through each one of these, but I'll highlight them here. Understanding the privacy versus convenience trade-off. Managing your privacy, protecting your data. And then we're going to talk about what I'm proposing to be 1 week of 5-minute checkups for us to all perform to kind of validate where we stand in terms of keeping our information private. So let's dive into each of these. So understanding the privacy versus convenience trade-off, we need to make informed decisions about sharing our data with businesses. Think about it this way. Consider the amount of personal information they're asking for and weigh it against the benefits that you expect to receive for providing that information. And be wary of apps or services that might require access to information that's not relevant to their services. If you've ever downloaded an app on your phone, and I'm sure all of you have, likely that app at some point asks for permission to do certain things. Now, if you're downloaded a weather app and it's asking for permission to manage or gain access to your location, that makes sense because the weather is going to be relevant to the location that you're in. If, on the other hand, you've downloaded some app that's maybe a game and they're asking for access to your location, or they're asking for access to your contacts, you should be suspect of why they actually need that level of access. And lastly here, delete any unused apps. Oftentimes, if you're like me, I've downloaded apps just to play with them, just to see if there's value in them. Or perhaps I expected it and then found out that there really wasn't the value that I expected. Well, rather than just allow those apps to remain on your device, whether that's your phone or your laptop or your tablet, delete those unused apps because they're going to continue to update. There'll be software updates against them. And if you're not even monitoring them because you're not using them, how do you know what those updates may have changed? Maybe now they have access to your contacts when you first installed the app, they didn't have access to that level of information. So delete those unused apps. There's no need to have them. They're just taking up space. Second here, manage your privacy. So actually take some time and check the privacy and security settings of the web services and apps that you have installed. Set them to whatever your comfort level is of information sharing. You can get started by doing this. Now, you may not know exactly how to do that, right? So when I say check them, well, natural question is, how do I do that? Well, you can get started by going to the National Cybersecurity Alliance's website. They have a link there for managing your privacy settings. It's actually a whole page It'll tell you how to walk through and check the settings of many, many, many social media accounts, retail store accounts, apps, and more. The link to doing this, I've actually included at the end of this presentation, so you'll have access to it. But just know that it exists out there. There are good instructions out there for how to manage those privacy settings and security settings. You want to protect your data, obviously. So I'm sure that you've all heard security professionals like myself saying, well, create long, complex, and unique passphrases. Now, I differentiate a passphrase here as opposed to a simple password. There is a difference. We'll talk a little bit about those. Store those passwords or passphrases in a password manager. We all have tons of them. They're hard to remember. I get it. So there are secure password manager applications out there that you can download and utilize. Be careful of which password manager you're selecting. Do some homework and make sure that you're selecting a good one. And enable multi-factor authentication, sometimes called MFA or 2FA, wherever it's possible. Those have actually been found to block 99.9% of all automated attacks. Now, multi-factor authentication, you've likely all used it, although you might not have called it that. If you're using a banking application or many other applications at this point, it might ask you for a password or passphrase to log in. And then it'll say, we've just sent a code to your phone, enter that code. Or it might be looking for some biometric authentication, like understanding that seeing your face on the screen and knowing that it's you, or a fingerprint. Those are all forms of multi-factor authentication. The point is, it's not just taking a password, it's asking for yet another layer of authentication before it gives you access. So enable those whenever possible. And this is this five-minute checkup that I spoke about. So doing all of this for your own personal privacy and security can seem daunting, and I get that. So why not take it and break it off into more consumable chunks? So for instance, perhaps on Monday, you choose to review your social media accounts for their privacy settings. On Tuesday, maybe you review your email accounts. On Wednesday, review your device settings on all of your devices, phone, tablets, laptops, and so forth. On Thursday, take a look at your web browser and see what's happening there. And on Friday, just take a look at any other apps that you might have out there, maybe a fitness tracker or a retail app. But if you break it down into these more consumable chunks, it might not seem quite so overwhelming to actually take care of your own privacy. And we have this new environment that we are all in. I call it the Internet of Me. It's growing, it's expanding, and the data that exists about you can be used in a variety of ways. Sometimes ways that you've expected, anticipated, sometimes you wouldn't expect or perhaps never approve of. So that's why it's important to understand the value of your personal information, how to manage it, and how to protect it. So how do we do that? Well, do your homework. There's this growing list of an ever-expanding universe of internet-connected devices. So do your research before you purchase one and understand what's going to happen with it. Check out user reviews of the product. Look at it, look it up to see where the security and privacy concerns are. Are there security features that can be enabled or perhaps that it doesn't have that you might have expected it to have? So before you go and purchase that new refrigerator that's capable of emailing you to tell you that you're running low on eggs, maybe you want to understand that it's also capable of tracking your purchasing habits and that data might be less protected than you would desire it to be. Own your online presence. So from the very moment that you turn on this new smart device or sign up for some new online account, configure it right from the very start to your privacy and your desired security settings. Most of these devices, for ease of use, for convenience purposes, come with their accounts set to the least secure settings. So take a moment, look at them, configure them to whatever is appropriate for your level of comfort. And disable any features that you don't need, like location tracking. Make it a point to regularly check them, because as software updates are sent down to these devices, it might go in and reset some of your configuration that you've set, that you're comfortable with. So not a bad habit to get into just checking them periodically. Keep a clean machine. We talked about this a moment ago about deleting apps, right? So keep all the software on any internet connected device current. That means patched. If you get a notification that says there's a patch available, particularly if it says it's a security patch, apply it. I understand the inconvenience or the disruption that might cause you periodically, but those patches exist for a reason, and it's important that we keep these machines patched. Again, configure the devices appropriately, and that would include automatically updating or at least notifying you when an update is available. If you have the option of selecting an automatic update, I do recommend that. It takes one more headache away from you. And here we go again, talking about passphrases and the complexity and uniqueness of them. So create long, complex, and unique passphrase, but length trumps complexity. So the longer a passphrase is or a password is, the more difficult it is to crack. That's the bottom line. You can think that something's complex or unique. Perhaps it is, perhaps it's not, but length always trumps complexity. A strong passphrase is, I consider it a sentence or a phrase, as it says, that's at least 12 characters long. That seems like a lot, but think about it this way. A passphrase could be, I'll make one up on the fly here. I happen to enjoy, been there a few times and really love the place. I happen to like Bermuda. So I might think passphrase could be, I love Bermuda. If I change the I to a 1 and an O to a 0 and an E to a 3, and I capitalize the first letter of each of those words, and then I add a special, a unique character, a special character, perhaps a hashtag or an exclamation point, I could end up with a passphrase there that spelled out looks like hashtag 1 capital L 0 V 3 capital B 3 R M U D A exclamation point. And now I will remember that because it's something that is meaning to me, but it's long and it's complex. Focus on positive sentences or phrases that you might like to think about and are easy to remember. You can create a passphrase that says anything you want, but if it's positive, it's more likely going to be something that you're anxious to remember. But passphrases aren't enough, as we said. Use that two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Again, that could include biometrics, security keys, some one-time code that's sent through a device whenever it's possible. And remember this, less is more. Whenever you're completing a profile for an account and it's asking you for information, you do not have to provide all that information. Now, some of it will be asterisk, as indicating that it's mandatory. Even if it is, who's to say that you have to answer it honestly? You don't need to give them your address, your home address. If you don't want to, you can make up an address or give a PO box. Limit whatever information it is that you're putting online. If it's not required, don't add it. And even if a company does require information that you don't feel comfortable with submitting, maybe reconsider creating a profile with that company in the first place. If your spidey senses are tingling and it doesn't feel right, go with your gut. So I have kids, they're grown. Those kids have kids, so I have grandkids, and I worry about them in this world that we live in. Our families are very digitally connected, and we need to think about safety and security both online and offline. And every child here that we know has been taught basic safety and security, like not talking to strangers or looking both ways before crossing the street. Teaching young people easy to learn life lessons for online security and privacy begins with parents leading the way or adult family members leading the way. There is an act called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, known as COPPA. This gives parents control over whatever information websites can collect on their kids. It's administered by the FTC, and they spell out what the operators of websites and online services must do to protect the privacy and safety of kids under age of 13. I personally would like to see that age limit elevated, but as it stands right now, they are required to do these things for kids under the age of 13. I think a good analogy for all of us is to remember that personal information is like money. We put value on money and we protect it, and we should put value in our personal information and likewise protect it. Whether that's information about what games our kids like to play online or what they search for, it has value, just like money. So we should talk to our kids about the value of the information that they're putting out there, and how to be selective about what information they're providing to apps and websites. Have a discussion with them about what types of information they should share and what types of information they should not share, such as addresses, photos, phone numbers, and so forth. And this is important. We need to reinforce with everybody in our lives, particularly young people, that what happens online stays online forever. There may be instances where organizations are claiming that the information is no longer available. It may not be through their application, but that doesn't mean it's not sitting somewhere else. And we need to make sure that they understand, our kids understand, that the information they share can be copied and is almost impossible to take back. And teach them to consider who might see a post and how it might be perceived in the future. It's one thing to post photos or videos of some rager that teenagers are at or college kids are at, but when those same posts and those same videos become part of a credit application or part of a job application or part of a security authentic authorization process, it's very difficult to explain that at that point. And again, own your online presence. So start a conversation about the public nature of the internet early, reinforce it often. Learn about for yourselves, teach your kids how to use privacy and security settings for their games and apps. And take a moment maybe to sit down and configure them together, explaining why we're restricting such features such as location tracking. And you might be surprised, they might be able to explain a few things to you as well. And then remain positively engaged. Pay attention to what they're doing. In the real world, we're all taught that there are good neighborhoods, not so good neighborhoods. The online world is no different. So help each other to identify where it's safe and trusted, and stay away from those sites that are not so safe or trusted. And encourage cautiousness about clicking and downloading or posting or uploading content. And that golden rule that we all learned as kids is applicable here as well. Post only about others as you would like to have them post about you. We've seen instances all too often of cyberbullying and the effects that can have on the children involved as well as society as a whole. So simply be careful about it and apply that golden rule. What they do online can positively and negatively impact people, and they should be aware of that. And be honest about threats. Be real with our kids. They're smarter and more intuitive than many of us give them credit for. So be real with them. Talk to them about threats that they might face online. Why it's important to keep their personal information private, and they'll all be better off for it. So let's switch gears here and talk about organizations. The mantra here for our organizations is respect privacy. And the major themes here are around conducting an assessment, adopting a privacy framework, educating employees. So we're going to talk about through these one at a time. Conducting an assessment, keeping individuals' personal information safe and appropriate from unauthorized access. That's what we're trying to do here. A recent Pew study showed 79% of adults in the US are concerned about how their information is being collected, stored, and protected and shared by businesses. So we want to make sure that personal data that we collect is processed in a fair manner. And we want to make sure that we're only collecting data for relevant and legitimate purposes, and maintain oversight of our partners and vendors. Many of us have partners or business vendors that will either collect this information for us, store it for us, or utilize it, maybe share it with larger collectives on our behalf. but we want to make sure that they're doing so in a manner that is consistent with our own business values of what we're doing with that same data. So consider adopting a privacy framework. It can help to manage the risk and more importantly, creates this culture of privacy within your organization and builds that culture into the business itself. There are some frameworks that you might consider. NIST, National Institute of Standards for Technology, has a privacy framework. AICPA, American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, that's what it is, has a privacy management framework. And the ISO standard has a ISO standard 27701 that is also a framework around privacy for information management. Those are just a few, but I have links for those at the back of this presentation as well. But educate our employees. So explain, why do we have a privacy policy? What is it? Why do we care about it? But those privacy policies should also help to educate employees on their own individual obligations within your organization of protecting that personal information. And start doing that by teaching new employees about their role during that onboarding process. Don't consider it as something that happens down the line. Start to indoctrinate them into this culture of privacy right from their start with your organization. Engage your staff. Ask them to consider how privacy and security applies to the work they do on a daily basis. If you're not down in the weeds of what happens in every minutia moment of your organization, then ask the people who are how we could be doing this better. And then incorporate their thoughts and ideas into how you deploy privacy considerations. And teach your employees how to update their privacy and security settings, both in work and on their personal accounts. We talked about that in the last section. So here's a few ways. I've got 5 ways here to help employees be more #privacy aware, if you want to kind of create the hashtag around that or utilize it. So create this privacy aware culture. Make sure your leadership is involved, maybe deputize some privacy ambassadors. Create an awareness campaign to educate your employees on what your privacy policy is. Share messages around the office. Teach new employees about their roles right from the beginning and reinforce it throughout their career. Number 2 is organize a privacy awareness training session. So maybe invite an outside speaker to talk to your employees, engage your staff, ask them how to consider how privacy and data security applies to them on a daily basis. NCSA is the National Cybersecurity Association's Data Privacy Day. That's today, January 28th. That's why we're doing this. Help employees manage their individual privacy. We talked about this, right? So the link that you see on this page is the link that I talked earlier about privacy settings. This link is available again at the end of this presentation. There's a bunch of resources that I've lined out. This link is there, so you don't have to necessarily jot this down or remember it, but know that that is a good thing to help employees understand how to deal with their own individual privacy. The reason is if they're concerned about their individual privacy and they're learning about how to protect it, they're very likely to translate those concerns into the work setting as well, and therefore make your work setting more secure and more privacy aware. Add privacy to your employees' toolbox. So give them the actual tools that they can use to improve their privacy. Some of these might be company branded camera covers. So if you're like me, you're staring at your laptop right now and there's a little green light that shows that my camera is on. There have been hacks in the past where the bad actors have gotten in and disabled that little light so that you don't know your camera's on, and then they turn the camera on and begin tracking movements. But you could have camera covers that just sit over that piece, and you remove the cover when you know that you want to have the camera activated. Or perhaps have virtual private networks deployed within your organization so that those are secured connections, and the employees know that if they're using the VPN, they're tunneling those communications through a secured mechanism. And lastly, let the experts handle it. Most employees aren't privacy and security experts. So build some mechanism in that makes it easy for them to report any concerns around privacy or security. If you have a help desk, maybe they can report it to your help desk. If you use a managed service provider, maybe they have the mechanism to report it to their managed service provider. If none of those exist, at least allow them some mechanism to report it upward within the management chain of your organization, so that they're not left holding the bag and not knowing what to do with it. But if you're still wondering whether you're doing enough to protect your customers' data, we're going to walk through kind of a roadmap over the next couple of slides. We'll ask a question, and then based upon a yes or no answer to that question, we'll direct some action. So the first question here is, do you collect personal information through a website? If the answer is no, you can follow that red line right off the screen and we'll go on to the next slide. But for the sake of argument, let's assume it's yes. If you do collect personal information through a website, do you have a privacy statement? Well, if you do, let's make sure that that privacy statement clearly communicates your data and use practices and includes contact information of how you might want to escalate or what information you collect, use, and share. If you don't have a privacy statement, lack of having it in writing doesn't mean you shouldn't communicate what your beliefs around privacy are. So communicate clearly and often what privacy means to your organization and take steps to achieve and maintain that privacy and security. So privacy policy could be one way to achieve that. But let's go on to that large red arrow. No, you don't collect personal information through a website. That leads us to the next screen. Do you collect personal information in person? If you're sitting with a client, are you asking them to give you personal information? Again, if the answer is no, we'll get to that in a second, but let's assume the answer is yes, then we should ensure that the amount of information and the type of data that we're collecting is appropriate to your business purpose. You'll want to disclose to your customers or your consumers how you're going to use that data. Disclose whether you share that data and provide ways for them to limit their information use and sharing, and communicate those ways to your consumers. So if you've said no here, that you don't collect personal information in person, we've already said we don't collect it via our website. Now we're saying we don't collect it in person. We'll go on to this next slide. Do we collect personal information from third parties or apps? So do we have a relationship, a contractual relationship with some third party where they're collecting information maybe on a wider scale, and we're availing ourselves through that relationship to some of the information they've collected? Well, if the answer is no, you see we end up at the bottom of the screen, but let's assume the answer is yes, that we do take some information from third parties or apps. Have we confirmed that each source got permission to share that data? Just because someone's sharing information with you doesn't mean that they got permission initially to collect and share that data. So if they did, in addition to your own privacy practices, you are also responsible for how your partners use and collect personal information. If you've established a relationship, you have a de facto responsibility to make sure that that relationship is sharing information that's appropriate and that they have permission to share. Now, if they don't, or you don't collect information from third parties, either way, you still now have the question 11 before you. Have you thought about how you collect information? And have you thought about how that information is stored and kept secure? So this slide here will talk to us a little bit about storing and securing personal data. So we want to evaluate and use controls that prevent unauthorized access. And there's some bullet points here that talk about how you might do that, including making sure that access privileges are reviewed and updated regularly, that you have some written security policy and that you've educated your employees and third parties on it, and more importantly, that you enforce it. There's no point in having any policy if it's just going to be sitting on a shelf collecting dust and you're unwilling to enforce it. Also, monitoring and tracking the way you use and manage consumer data. So monitor that use, understand and keep track of user choices before you share personal information with third parties. If you've offered an opportunity for people to opt out of sharing, you need to make sure that you're complying with that request to opt out, and have a policy that encourages your company to dispose of personal information when it's no longer useful. So I would typically refer to that as a data retention and destruction policy. So know how long you want to keep data, know that you have a means to destroy or remove that data from your environment once you no longer need it. If, again, that transparency, that level of transparency back to your consumers will go a long way in building trust and likely their willingness to provide that data to you. So that is all the information that I have. But before we jump into questions and follow-ups, I'm just going to jump ahead for a moment. These next few slides, you'll see them here, contained all the links, so that we have a COVID-19 security resource library, security awareness videos, an Cyber Essentials Tools Kit, an identity theft resource center, Federal Trade Commission websites, National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, this is their framework for privacy, some National Security Alliance Managing Your Privacy Settings page. This is the link I referenced several times around how to get to and manage those settings. The NIST privacy framework, the AICPA privacy framework, the ISO privacy framework, pages from the FTC around protecting your kids' privacy online, and Consumer Reports, how to protect children's privacy online. And so now, Lauren, I'm all set to take any questions or comments or follow-ups that might have come in.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Wade, for your presentation. And for anyone who has questions, please put them in the chat box. Looks like we have one already. So you said earlier in the presentation to check your software applications, browser apps, etc. weekly. Are there steps you can outline as to how to do this for the various online systems?
So a lot of that is captured within that link that I referenced a few moments ago from the National Cybersecurity Alliance. They have within that link, if you go to their page, they actually spell out for a whole multitude of applications and websites how to go about checking those privacy settings. Click by click by click, they tell you how to do it.
So Bob, how can you obtain a copy of the links we just shared? I will be emailing everyone after the webinar, and I'll be sending you all the recording of this as well as the presentation, and the presentation has the link, so you'll have access to that later today. Can you remove apps that your iPhone comes with and you don't use, such as the health app, books, stocks, GarageBand, etc.?
So you can. You may need to go to the Apple site and query how to remove those apps, or if you're an Android user, the same type of thing. You can remove most of them. I caveat that by saying most, because there are some that they don't provide the literature on how to remove them. But if you search hard enough online, you should be able to find some mechanism to remove those applications.
Yeah, Ursula, I think if you, yeah, you said you have an iPhone. If you just tap and hold the app, it'll shake, and if you're able to delete it, it'll come up and it'll say, delete the app. And if it's not, it won't come up with it. But I think most apps on the iPhone you can delete pretty easily. I have a Gmail account. I have set my assistant as an authorized user, but I also have two-factor authentication. When she tries to log in, I get the two-factor code. How do I get into my account without having to give her the two-factor code every single time she wants to log in?
You can't. That's the easy answer. That is how two-factor that's how two-factor works. And it's for exactly that reason that two-factor exists. Because if somebody else had access to that email account, let's say they just cracked the password, and you set it up so that others could get in without using the two-factor, that circumnavigates the benefit of the two-factor. It is not good practice to share passwords, but it is worse practice to disable two-factor authentication. So for your own safety purposes, I do not recommend disabling it. And this is part of the convenience versus security and privacy considerations. I understand that there may be a convenience factor there, but if you are hacked or compromised, your privacy data is stolen, you will wish that you had not circumnavigated that protocol.
Next question. My challenge has always been that I have administrators helping me to do some of my administrative tasks, so they need to log in as me sometimes. How do you suggest I handle the password issue?
Well, again, I'm not, without knowing the specifics of the environment, you would want to, ideally, you would want to use a protocol or a set of applications that allow you to share administrative work without providing without providing your actual passwords to it. So in other words, you'd have specific accounts set up for each of those administrators. Those administrators would be permitted to do certain work within your account, but not all the work within your account, as you would restrict them. So if this is a Microsoft Office 365 account, those capabilities exist. If this is a Google Enterprise account or Google Gmail account, depending upon the level of which you've subscribed, you may have more robust security control and privacy controls. There is no magic bullet here. I'm sorry to say, there's no magic bullet that allows you to satisfy the convenience desires and not compromise the security or privacy. So you need to strike that balance, but there is no real magic bullet.
Okay, are there any other questions? That might be the last one.
Okay. My contact information is on there, so if anybody does have other questions, they can reach out to me directly. I'm happy to just try to answer their questions for them.
Great. So as a reminder to everyone, this webinar has been recorded and it will be available to view in the next few days on our website at marealtor.com, as well as our YouTube channel. You'll find it on our webinars page in the green archive section, and you can find any upcoming webinars there as well. Before you close your screen today, you'll see a survey. If you would like to fill that out, we appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much, Wade, for your presentation, and we hope to see you all next time.
My pleasure. Thanks.